I clutched the prenuptial agreement in my trembling hands, watching Daniel's face transform from smug confidence to dawning horror. Here we sat at Canlis, Seattle's most exclusive restaurant, where my husband of 10 years had boldly brought his mistress to our anniversary dinner. Jennifer Parker, his young associate, shifted uncomfortably in her designer dress, her perfectly manicured fingers gripping her wine glass as I revealed the hidden clause that would destroy everything they had planned. Before we dive deeper into this moment, I need you to know that if this story resonates with you, make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell, because tomorrow's story will leave you speechless. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. The morning started like any other June day in Seattle, with a light drizzle tapping against the windows of our Mercer Island home. I stood in my walk-in closet, carefully selecting my outfit for what I thought would be an intimate anniversary celebration. The navy silk dress I chose had been Daniel's favorite, back when he still noticed such things. 10 years of marriage, and I'd spent weeks planning this evening, even though something felt off about Dan's insistence on changing our usual anniversary tradition. Instead of our cherished spot on Bainbridge Island, he'd made reservations at Canlis, claiming he wanted this year to be special. I should have known then, just as I should have noticed how his late nights at Foster & Hayes had multiplied since Jennifer Parker joined the firm 9 months ago. But I was too busy growing my real estate development company, too trusting of the man who'd sworn to love me forever in front of 300 guests at our waterfront wedding. The signs had been there, subtle at first, like whispers you try to ignore. Dan changed his phone's password, angled his screen away during text messages, and suddenly developed an interest in early morning rowing on Lake Washington, the same lake where Jennifer coincidentally practiced yoga every morning. My best friend Olivia had tried to warn me, in her gentle way, during our weekly coffee meetings at her Capitol Hill cafe. "Becca," she'd say, stirring her latte with concerned eyes, "don't you think it's strange how Dan always mentions Jennifer in his work stories?" But I'd dismissed her concerns, believing in the solid foundation of our marriage, our shared dreams, the life we'd built together. After all, I was Rebecca Mitchell, one of Seattle's most successful real estate developers. Women like me didn't get betrayed. Until we did. Susan Carter, Dan's former executive assistant who'd retired 6 months ago, sent me an email last week that shattered my carefully constructed reality. "I couldn't leave without telling you," she wrote. "Check the Montana LLC registrations. Look for Evergreen Vista Holdings." That single tip led me down a rabbit hole of discovery, each revelation more devastating than the last. Working late into the night in my downtown office, overlooking the glittering lights of Puget Sound, I uncovered the truth. With Amy Zhang's forensic expertise, we traced a complex web of hidden assets and secret property purchases. Dan and Jennifer had been planning their future together, using my own industry connections to build their escape route. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd used my real estate expertise against me, thinking I wouldn't notice the subtle manipulations of property records and offshore accounts. But they'd forgotten one crucial detail: the prenuptial agreement Dan had so confidently signed a decade ago, believing his law degree made him smarter than everyone else in the room. What he didn't know was that my mentor, Barbara Wilson, had insisted on a special clause, one buried deep in the legal jargon he'd skimmed over. "Always protect your future," Barbara had said, her wisdom born from 30 years in Seattle's cutthroat real estate market. Men like Dan, they think they're invincible until they're not. Now, as I sat across from them at our anniversary dinner, watching Dan's hand unconsciously drift toward Jennifer's, I thought about Barbara's words. The restaurant hummed with quiet conversation, the Seattle skyline twinkling beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Dan had chosen this public setting thinking it would prevent a scene, believing I would maintain appearances at all costs. "Happy anniversary, darling," he'd said earlier, kissing my cheek with practiced ease while Jennifer hovered nearby. Her presence explained away as a chance encounter with a colleague. the same colleague who wore the diamond bracelet I'd found receipt for in Dan's desk, dated just 2 weeks ago. If this story has touched your heart, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow's upload will show you another side of betrayal and redemption you won't want to miss. Now let me tell you how I turned this anniversary dinner into a moment they'd never forget. The Seattle rain intensified as I pulled into the underground parking of my downtown office building, my thoughts drifting back to the life Dan and I had carefully constructed. From the outside, we embodied success, the power couple who'd met at a charity gala, fallen in love over discussions of property law and market trends, and built an enviable life in our lakefront Mercer Island estate. Our world revolved around charity boards, tennis club memberships, and weekend brunches with Seattle's elite. I'd established myself as a force in luxury real estate development, transforming forgotten properties into coveted addresses, while Dan's reputation at Foster & Hayes grew with each high-profile case. We hosted dinner parties where conversations flowed as smoothly as the expensive wine, and our guests unevenly complimented our perfect marriage. The first crack appeared during last winter's firm holiday party. I'd noticed how Jennifer Parker commanded attention in her red designer dress, fresh out of law school with ambition blazing in her eyes. She laughed at all of Dan's jokes, touched his arm when she spoke, and somehow knew intimate details about our home's wine cellar organization. At the time, I'd attributed her knowledge to professional thoroughness. After all, she was Dan's new associate, eager to impress. Looking back, I should have paid attention to how Susan Carter, Dan's executive assistant of 15 years, watched them that night. Her retirement announcement came unexpectedly 2 months later, though she'd previously talked about working several more years. "Sometimes it's better to leave while you can still choose how," she'd said cryptically during her farewell lunch. The foundation of our marriage had begun crumbling in subtle ways. Dan stopped joining me for our Sunday morning walks along the lake, claiming he needed to review case files. Our traditional date nights became increasingly sporadic, replaced by late meetings and client emergencies. He grew protective of his phone, installed a new password on his laptop, and began taking calls in our garden where conversations couldn't be overheard. My real estate intuition, honed through years of detecting hidden property issues, had started tingling. Small inconsistencies emerged like hairline cracks in a seemingly solid foundation. Expense reports from his firm showed dinner meetings at intimate restaurants I'd never heard him mention. A jewelry store clerk called our home to confirm delivery of a package I hadn't ordered. Dan's credit card statements revealed weekend charges in Portland when he'd claimed to be at conferences in Chicago. Olivia noticed the changes during our weekly coffee meetings at her Capitol Hill cafe. "You've lost weight," she observed one rainy morning, sliding a blueberry muffin across the table. And not in a good way. She was right. Sleepless nights spent analyzing every interaction, every excuse, every subtle shift in our relationship had taken their toll. I buried myself in work, focusing on my latest development project, converting an old warehouse in Ballard into luxury waterfront condos. But even there, whispers reached me. Jennifer Parker had been seen touring one of my properties with Dan, their heads close together as they discussed floor plans. A colleague mentioned spotting them at a quiet wine bar in Pioneer Square, far from the usual legal district haunts. Barbara Wilson, my mentor and the woman who'd helped me navigate Seattle's male-dominated real estate world, dropped by my office unannounced one afternoon. She took one look at my face and closed the door. "Tell me," she said simply, settling into my visitor's chair with the patience of someone who'd seen it all before. I found myself spilling everything: the late nights, the changed passwords, the mysterious calls. Barbara listened silently, her expression growing darker. When I finished, she pulled out her phone and made a call. "Amy Zhang," she said. "I'm sending someone your way. This needs your special touch." Amy, a forensic accountant with a reputation for uncovering hidden assets, became my secret weapon. Together, we began unraveling Dan's carefully constructed deception. The Montana LLC Susan had mentioned was just the beginning. We discovered a trail of property investments, all technically legal, but deliberately concealed, dating back 6 months. The timing aligned perfectly with Jennifer's arrival at the firm. Each property had been purchased through a series of shell companies, the paperwork handled by different members of Dan's team to avoid suspicion. They'd used my own industry contacts, knowing most people wouldn't question transactions tangentially, connected to Rebecca Mitchell's real estate empire. The waterfront condo in Vancouver, the mountain lodge in Bend, the vineyard property in Walla Walla. Each purchase revealed another layer of betrayal. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. They'd been building their escape route, planning their future, using my professional reputation as cover while they dismantled our marriage. One evening, as I sat in my office reviewing Amy's latest findings, Olivia brought dinner and devastating news. "They were at Altura last night," she said, naming one of Seattle's most romantic restaurants. "My sous chef's wife works there. Jennifer was wearing a ring, Becca. Not an engagement ring, but definitely a promise." I crossed to my office window, watching fairy lights drift across the darkened sound. The woman reflected in the glass looked different from the trusting wife who'd hosted dinner parties and believed in her perfect marriage. This woman had steel in her spine and fire in her eyes. My phone buzzed with a text from Dan, reminding me about our upcoming anniversary dinner. At Canlis, the pieces suddenly clicked into place. His insistence on changing our usual plans, his casual mention that Jennifer might join some colleagues at the restaurant that night. They weren't even trying to hide anymore, confident in their ability to control the narrative. Little did they know, I'd been controlling the narrative all along. Every discovery, every piece of evidence had been carefully documented and shared with my growing team of allies. Rick Coleman, the city's shrewdest divorce attorney, had reviewed our prenuptial agreement with particular attention to the clause Barbara had insisted upon, the one that would turn their perfect plan into their worst nightmare. The rain had stopped, leaving the city gleaming like polished glass. In the distance, Mount Rainier emerged from its cloud cover, a reminder that even the most imposing facades could be revealed with patience. I picked up my phone and began making calls. Dan thought he was orchestrating a perfect exit strategy, but he'd forgotten something crucial about Seattle's real estate queen. I'd built my career on seeing the potential others missed, and I'd learned to never waste a prime opportunity for renovation. The signs had been flickering like warning lights I chose to ignore. Thursday morning Pilates sessions suddenly replaced by urgent client meetings. Golf games that stretched well past sunset. The way Dan's voice changed when his phone buzzed during dinner. A subtle shift in tone that spoke volumes. My husband had mastered the art of deception so gradually that I'd almost missed the transformation. Sitting in my corner office overlooking Lake Union, I scrolled through months of calendar entries, each one telling its own story. Jennifer Parker's name appeared with increasing frequency in firm memos, client meetings, and project assignments. Dan had orchestrated her rise from junior associate to his right hand with remarkable efficiency. The same efficiency he'd once used to win impossible cases now served a different purpose. Barbara's words from last week's lunch echoed in my mind as I studied the patterns. "Pay attention to the small changes," she'd said, stirring her martini at the Metropolitan Grill. "It's never about the big gestures. Look for the quiet shifts, the subtle redirections." She'd seen this before, watched other powerful men orchestrate their exits while their wives remained blissfully focused on maintaining appearances. A gentle knock interrupted my thoughts. Amy Zhang entered, carrying a thick folder and wearing the expression I'd come to recognize. She'd found something. The forensic accountant settled into the chair across from my desk, spreading documents with precise movements. "Look at these credit card statements," she said, highlighting a series of transactions. "Every third Thursday, there's a charge at Maximilian in Pike Place Market. Always after 7, always for 2. French cuisine. Dan hated French food, or at least he had during our marriage. I remembered his complaints about escargot during our Paris honeymoon, his insistence on finding burger joints in the City of Lights. Now he was a regular at Seattle's most romantic French restaurant, coincidentally on evenings when his calendar showed late depositions. Amy wasn't finished. She pulled up property records on her tablet, revealing a pattern that made my stomach clench. These real estate investments, they're clever. Each property purchased through a different LLC, all technically legitimate. But look at the timing. She scrolled through dates that corresponded perfectly with Jennifer's arrival at Foster and Hayes. They're building a nest egg, using your industry connections as cover. The irony tasted bitter. Dan had always claimed my real estate expertise bored him, zoning out during discussions of market trends and property values. Now he was using that same knowledge, filtered through Jennifer's ambitious planning, to construct their future. AI. Future that apparently included a waterfront condo in Vancouver and a vineyard in Walla Walla. Properties purchased through shell companies with innocuous names. My phone buzzed. Olivia, texting about meeting for coffee. These daily check-ins had become my lifeline, moments of honesty in a world of careful pretense. I grabbed my coat, needing the escape of her Capitol Hill cafe, where exposed brick walls and the scent of freshly ground coffee promised temporary sanctuary. Olivia waited at our usual corner table, 2 steaming lattes and concern in her eyes. "You look exhausted," she said, pushing a plate of lavender shortbread toward me. "Have you been sleeping?" Sleep had become a luxury, replaced by late-night deep dives into financial records and property deeds. Each discovery added another crack to the facade of my marriage. "They're getting careless," I said, warming my hands around the ceramic mug. "Or confident. Last night they were at our Tusi, together. The intimate Italian bar was barely 10 minutes from our Mercer Island home, a bold choice for a supposedly secret affair. Jennifer wore the bracelet, the one from the Tiffany receipt I found in Dan's desk." Olivia's expression hardened. As a business owner who'd built her coffee empire from a single cart, she understood the particular sting of betrayal masked as business acumen. "Have you told Rick everything?" she asked, referring to the divorce attorney Barbara had recommended. Rick Coleman's reputation for handling high-profile splits with surgical precision had made him the obvious choice. "Meeting him tomorrow," I replied, watching Seattle's perpetual drizzle paint patterns on the cafe windows. "Barbara's coming too. She wants to discuss the prenup clause." The clause Dan had dismissed as standard legal language, too focused on protecting his own assets to recognize the trap it represented. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of meetings and property tours. I maintained my normal schedule, reviewing plans for the Ballard waterfront development, meeting with contractors, and presenting to investors. Nobody would guess that beneath my professional exterior, I was orchestrating my own careful strategy. Susan Carter's warning email arrived during a site inspection. "Thought you should know," she wrote. "Jennifer's sister works for the title company handling the Vancouver property transfer. They're planning to close next week." The pieces clicked into place. The anniversary dinner at Canlis, the rushed property purchase, the increasing boldness of their public appearances. Back in my office, I called Rick. His response was immediate and decisive. "Don't confront them yet," he advised. "Let them think they're in control. We need to document everything. Every meeting, every transaction, every deviation from their normal patterns." He paused, then added, "And Rebecca? The prenup clause about hidden assets? It's ironclad. Barbara Wilson is a genius." That evening, as I drove home across the floating bridge, watching Seattle's skyline emerge from the mist, I thought about transformation. The city had reinvented itself countless times, growing from a rough port town into a gleaming tech hub. I'd witnessed dozens of properties undergo similar metamorphoses under my guidance, revealing their true potential beneath neglected exteriors. Now it was my turn. Dan thought he was crafting a perfect exit, using my business acumen against me. He'd forgotten that I'd built my career on seeing the potential others missed, on turning seemingly hopeless situations into opportunities. As I pulled into our circular driveway, I noticed his car was missing. Another late night at the office, another dinner with Jennifer, another thread in the tapestry of lies they'd woven. Inside our spotless kitchen, I found a note in his familiar handwriting. "Working late. Don't wait up." Next to it sat the Canlis reservation confirmation for our anniversary dinner, the date circled in his precise hand. 10 years of marriage would end where they'd begun, with careful planning and calculated risks. But this time, I would be the one controlling the outcome. I poured a glass of wine and walked out onto our lakefront terrace, watching lights twinkle across the water. Somewhere in the city, my husband and his mistress were planning their future, confident in their ability to orchestrate a clean break. They had no idea that every step they'd taken, every property they'd purchased, every secret meeting they'd held had only strengthened my position. The prenup clause wasn't just about hidden assets. It was about integrity, about consequences for betrayal masked as business strategy. Dan had built his legal career on attention to detail, on finding leverage in overlooked clauses. Now those same skills would prove his undoing. As I watched a seaplane land on Lake Washington, sending ripples across the still surface, I smiled. Sometimes the most powerful moves in any game are the ones your opponent never sees coming. The morning our world shattered started with perfect Seattle sunshine, a rare enough occurrence that I'd normally have appreciated the irony. My husband's latest property acquisition had closed, a fact I discovered not through him, but through Amy's meticulous monitoring of real estate transactions. The Vancouver waterfront condo now belonged to Evergreen Vista Holdings, the shell company he'd created with Jennifer's help. Standing in my home office, overlooking the pristine waters of Lake Washington, I held the documentation that would change everything. Bank transfers, property deeds, surveillance photos, and most importantly, the annotated prenuptial agreement Rick had prepared. Each page told its own story of calculated deception and careful planning. Not just mine, but theirs. The call from Susan Carter arrived just as I was reviewing the latest evidence. Rebecca, her voice carried urgency I'd never heard before. Jennifer just resigned from Foster and Hayes, effective immediately. My hands gripped the desk's edge as she continued. "They're planning to announce their relationship at your anniversary dinner. Make it seem like something that just happened, not the months-long affair it's been." The pieces clicked into place with devastating clarity. Dan's insistence on Canlis, his casual mention that some colleagues might be there, his recent transfer of substantial funds to offshore accounts. They weren't just planning to reveal their relationship. They were orchestrating what they thought would be a civilized, controlled dissolution of our marriage. I called Olivia immediately, needing her grounding presence. She arrived at my office within 30 minutes, carrying a bag from her cafe, and determination in her stride. "They won't know what hit them," she said, spreading out fresh croissants and coffee on my conference table. "You've built an empire from the ground up. Did they really think you wouldn't notice them trying to dismantle it?" Amy Jang joined us shortly after, her tablet filled with damning financial records. "The pattern is clear," she explained, pulling up transaction histories. "Every major purchase, every account transfer corresponds with Jennifer's timeline at the firm. They've been planning this for at least 8 months." The evidence painted a picture of careful calculation. Dan and Jennifer had used my business connections, my industry reputation, even my own investment strategies to build their escape route. The Vancouver condo, purchased through a labyrinth of shell companies. The Walla Walla Vineyard, its ownership obscured by clever legal footwork. Even the Montana property Susan had initially flagged, all pieces of their imagined future. Rick Coleman arrived last, his presence adding legal weight to our impromptu war council. The prenup clause is our ace, he confirmed, reviewing the documents spread across my conference table. When Barbara Wilson insisted on including it, she created the perfect trap for exactly this situation. The clause itself seemed innocuous at first glance, standard language about financial disclosure and hidden assets. But Barbara, with decades of experience watching powerful men orchestrate their exits, had crafted something more nuanced. Any attempt to conceal assets, any property purchase through deceptive means, wouldn't just be subject to division, it would be forfeited entirely. They've done everything exactly wrong, Rick continued, highlighting key passages. Using shell companies, hiding transactions, manipulating business connections, it all triggers the clause. Every property, every account they thought they were cleverly concealing becomes yours. Outside my office windows, Seattle's skyline shimmered in the unusual sunlight. I thought about transformation, about how the city had reinvented itself countless times. From logging town to aerospace hub to tech center, each change bringing new opportunities for those who could see them. A text from Dan lit up my phone. Looking forward to our anniversary dinner. I have news to share. The audacity of it, the careful casualness of his tone, made something shift inside me. This man, who'd stood beside me as I built my company, who'd witnessed my transformation from ambitious realtor to successful developer, thought he could outmaneuver me using my own expertise. Olivia's hand covered mine, offering silent support. She'd been there from the beginning, watching me navigate Seattle's competitive real estate market, celebrating each success, consoling every setback. "What's the plan?" she asked, her voice steady and sure. Rick laid out the strategy with practiced precision. We would let them make their move at Canlis, let them think they were controlling the narrative. Then, when they least expected it, we would reveal our counterplay. Every document, every transaction, every secret meeting would be exposed. The timing needs to be perfect, Amy added, pulling up calendar entries. The Vancouver property closes tomorrow. The Walla Walla Vineyard transfer is scheduled for next week. They think they're safeguarding their future, but they're actually building our case. As my team discussed logistics, I walked to the window, watching seaplanes land on Lake Union. Each ripple they created spread outward, transforming the water's surface, just as Dan and Jennifer's choices would create waves they never anticipated. Susan called again, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Jennifer's clearing out her office. She told her assistant she's taking a position with a firm in Vancouver." Of course. The waterfront condo suddenly made more sense. They'd planned every detail, crafted every escape route, convinced they were too clever to be caught. The rest of the day passed in careful preparation. Rick finalized the legal documents while Amy compiled financial records. Olivia coordinated with her network of Seattle's service industry insiders, ensuring we knew every restaurant, every meeting spot, every careful interaction Dan and Jennifer had tried to hide. By evening, as Seattle's perpetual gray returned, the plan was set. I drove home across the floating bridge, watching the city lights emerge like stars falling into the Sound. Our Mercer Island house, once a symbol of shared success, now felt like a stage set for the final act of a play I knew was ending. Dan's car sat in the circular driveway, unusual for this time of day. Inside, I found him in his home office, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in the low, intimate tone I now recognized wasn't meant for client calls. He ended the conversation abruptly when he saw me, offering a practiced smile that never reached. His eyes. "Early night?" I asked, maintaining the performance we'd both perfected. "Just finishing some paperwork," he replied, shuffling documents into his briefcase. "The Anderson case is wrapping up." Another lie. The Anderson case had concluded weeks ago, a fact Susan had confirmed. I watched him move through our home with careful casualness, this man I'd loved for a decade, wondering if I'd ever really known him at all. "Tomorrow night at Canlis," He thought he would be writing the end of our story. He had no idea I'd already drafted a very different conclusion. In our bedroom, I laid out my outfit for tomorrow. Not the navy dress he'd expected, but a white power suit that made me feel invincible. On my nightstand, next to our wedding photo, sat the folder containing everything we'd discovered. Every lie, every secret meeting, every hidden transaction documented with devastating precision. Dan slept soundly beside me, confident in his carefully constructed plan. He had no idea that across the city my team was in motion. Amy monitoring financial transactions, Rick preparing legal documents, Olivia's network tracking every movement. Tomorrow night, when he thought he was orchestrating a perfect exit, he would discover just how thoroughly he'd been outmaneuvered. I watched Seattle's lights twinkle across the lake, thinking about endings and beginnings. Dan and Jennifer thought they were writing the final chapter of my story. They had no idea they were actually writing their own. I gathered my allies in the private meeting room of Olivia's Capitol Hill Cafe, the scent of freshly roasted coffee mingling with the weight of anticipation. Amy Jang spread financial documents across the reclaimed wood table, while Rick Coleman reviewed legal strategies on his tablet. Barbara Wilson, elegant as ever in her tailored suit, watched the scene unfold with the quiet confidence of someone who'd orchestrated similar victories before. "The timing has to be precise," Rick emphasized, highlighting key sections of the prenup clause. "Dan thinks he's protected by standard confidentiality agreements and corporate veils. He has no idea how thoroughly we've documented everything." The morning light filtered through the cafe's industrial windows, casting long shadows across our evidence. Bank statements, property records, surveillance photos, each piece telling its own story of betrayal. Susan Carter arrived next, carrying a thick manila envelope. "Jennifer's resignation letter," she explained, laying out more documents, "and copies of every email, every calendar entry, every client meeting they thought they'd hidden." Her meticulous record-keeping, born from years of managing Dan's office, had provided the foundation for our case. Olivia moved around the table, refreshing coffee cups and adding fresh pastries that no one touched. The gravity of what we were about to do weighted heavily in the room. This wasn't just about exposing an affair. It was about dismantling a carefully constructed deception that had used my own business acumen against me. "The Vancouver property transfer completed this morning," Amy reported, pulling up real-time banking alerts. They routed the funds through 3 different shells before landing in Evergreen Vista Holdings. Textbook attempt at concealment. She highlighted transaction dates that perfectly aligned with Jennifer's tenure at Foster & Hayes. Barbara leaned forward, her expression both satisfied and stern. "They've triggered every aspect of the clause," she noted, tapping the prenup document. "Hidden assets, deceptive property transfers, unauthorized use of business connections. It's all there. When this hits, they'll lose everything they thought they were cleverly concealing." A text from my private investigator lit up my phone. Photos of Dan and Jennifer entering a jewelry store in Pioneer Square. Through the window, I could see her trying on what looked suspiciously like an engagement ring. The audacity of it, planning their future while systematically dismantling. My present made something harden in my chest. "Foster & Hayes is already doing damage control," Susan added, showing us an internal memo. "They're preparing to distance themselves from both Dan and Jennifer. The managing partners don't want any hint of impropriety affecting the firm's reputation." The partners' loyalty, it seemed, extended only as far as their profit margins. Rick outlined our strategy for the Canleys' confrontation, each detail measured and precise. "Let them make the first move," he advised. "Let them think they're controlling the narrative. Once they've shown their hand, we'll reveal exactly how much we know." His confidence, born from years of handling high-profile divorces, steadied my nerves. Olivia's network of restaurant staff and service industry insiders had already confirmed Dan's special requests for tonight. A specific table overlooking the city, champagne on ice, every detail arranged to create his perfect moment. He'd even requested the same pianist who'd played at our wedding, a touch of calculated cruelty that revealed how long he'd planned this. "The Walla Walla Vineyard is next," Amy continued, pulling up more property records. "Transfer scheduled. For next week, again through multiple shells. They're not even trying to be subtle anymore. The vineyard had been my dream once, a retirement plan Dan had always dismissed as impractical. Now he was buying one for his future with Jennifer." Barbara's hand covered mine, her grip surprisingly strong. "Remember," she said, "you're not just exposing their affair. You're protecting everything you've built. Every property development, every business connection, every piece of your empire they tried to use for their escape. It all stays with you." The team dispersed gradually, each member clear on their role for tonight. Susan returned to Foster, and Hayes, monitoring any last-minute changes in Dan's plans. Amy stationed herself to track real-time financial movements. Olivia coordinated with her contacts at Canlis, ensuring we'd know the moment Dan and Jennifer arrived. Left alone with Barbara, I finally voiced the question that had been nagging at me. "How did you know?" I asked. 10 years ago, when you insisted on that specific clause in the prenup." She smiled, the expression both wise and slightly sad. "Because I've watched men like Dan my entire career. They think they're cleverer than everyone else, think they can use their wives' success against them. The clause isn't just about hidden assets. It's about consequences for betrayal masked as business strategy." The afternoon passed in careful preparation. I met with clients, reviewed property plans, maintained the normal rhythm of my day while my team moved pieces into position. A text from Dan confirmed he'd leave the office early to prepare for our special evening. Another, from my investigator, showed Jennifer entering an upscale salon, emerging hours later looking perfectly polished for her role in tonight's performance. In my downtown office, I changed into the white power suit I'd chosen for the occasion, its clean lines and precise tailoring feeling like armor. The prenup clause and supporting documents waited in a sleek leather portfolio, each page telling its own story of deception and discovery. Seattle's early evening light painted the city in shades of gold and rose, the Space Needle standing sentinel over the unfolding drama. From my window, I could see Canlis perched on its hillside, waiting for tonight's performance. Dan thought. He was directing a simple scene, a civilized dinner where he'd reveal his relationship with Jennifer, suggest an amicable divorce, present himself as the reasonable party. He had no idea he was actually walking into the final act of a very different play, one where every property he'd hidden, every account he'd concealed, every business connection he'd manipulated would be exposed with devastating precision. The prenup clause wasn't just about financial penalties. It was about justice served with the same calculated efficiency he'd used to betray me. My phone buzzed with final confirmations from the team. Everything was in place. In a few hours, Dan and Jennifer would discover exactly how thoroughly they'd been outmaneuvered. But first, I had one last call to make. Seated at my desk, watching, fairies crossed the sound like pieces moving across a game board. I dialed a familiar number. "Mrs. Mitchell," my banker answered, "everything is prepared exactly as you requested. The accounts will be frozen the moment you give the signal." 1. More peace in place, one more trap set with precise care. Tonight, when Dan thought he was orchestrating his perfect exit, he would learn an expensive lesson about underestimating the woman who'd built an empire while he plotted its destruction. The golden hour cast long shadows across my office as Amy Zhang methodically laid out the evidence we'd gathered. Bank statements fanned across my desk like playing cards, each one revealing another layer of Dan's carefully orchestrated deception. Property deeds, offshore account records, and surveillance photos created a damning mosaic of betrayal. "Look, at this pattern," Amy said, highlighting a series of transactions. "Every major property purchase coincides with Jennifer's business trips. Vancouver, Walla Walla, Montana. all acquired through different shell companies but following the same template. Her fingers traced the money trail through its labyrinth of concealment. My phone lit up with a message from Susan Carter. She'd discovered a hidden email account Dan used exclusively for communicating with Jennifer, filled with property discussions and future plans disguised as legal correspondence. The latest exchange detailed renovations for the Vancouver condo, discussing paint colors and furniture choices while pretending to review client contracts. Olivia arrived with fresh coffee and determination blazing in her eyes. My contact. At the jewelry store called, she said, settling into the leather chair across from my desk. Dan picked up something this afternoon. Custom piece, specially designed. The engagement ring he'd planned to give Jennifer after our marriage ended, no doubt. Rick Coleman joined us via video call, his office backdrop lined with law books. The financial concealment triggers every penalty clause in the prenup, he explained, scrolling through digital documents. Not just the obvious assets, but the professional implications as well. Using your business connections, leveraging your industry reputation. It all falls under breach of fiduciary duty. The investigation had revealed a scheme more elaborate than we'd initially suspected. Dan hadn't just hidden assets. He'd systematically used my professional network to build his escape route. Real estate agents who trusted my name, property, developers who valued our past dealings, financial advisors who respected my business acumen, all unknowingly drawn into his web of deception. Barbara's voice carried through my speakerphone, sharp with contained anger. The vineyard purchase is particularly egregious, she noted, using Rebecca's previous dealings with the seller to negotiate preferential terms, all while concealing the true ownership through multiple shell companies. The Walla Walla property had been my dream once, casually dismissed by Dan as impractical. Now he was buying one for Jennifer. My private investigator's latest report arrived via encrypted email. Photos showed Dan and Jennifer touring high-end furniture stores in downtown Seattle, their casual intimacy obvious even in surveillance shots. They'd grown bolder, less careful about being seen together, confident in their ability to control the narrative. Foster and Hayes is already preparing damage control, Susan reported during our afternoon update. Internal memos discussing partnership restructuring, client reassignment plans. They know something's coming. The firm's managing partners had always prided themselves on avoiding scandal. Dan's carefully constructed facade was about to shatter their reputation for discretion. Amy pulled up real-time banking alerts on her tablet. The latest transfer just cleared, she announced. Another $2 million moved through the Cayman Islands account, eventually landing in Evergreen Vista Holdings. Money that would have funded our retirement, now diverted to finance their new life together. The evidence mounted with each passing hour. Credit card statements revealed intimate dinners at secluded restaurants. Hotel receipts documented weekend getaways disguised as business conferences. Property records exposed a trail of acquisitions, each one carefully concealed behind layers of corporate bureaucracy. Rick's legal strategy took shape like an architectural blueprint, each element precisely placed. We'll start with the prenup violation, he outlined, then move to professional misconduct, unauthorized use of business relationships, and breach of fiduciary duty. The penalty clauses cascade, each one triggering additional consequences. Barbara had crafted those clauses with careful foresight, understanding how men like Dan operated. They always think they're too clever to get caught, she'd said when insisting on their inclusion. Give them enough rope, and they'll hang themselves with their own sophistication. Olivia's network of informants provided constant updates. Jennifer spending hours at an upscale salon, emerging camera-ready for tonight's performance. Dan visiting his personal tailor, ensuring his appearance matched the gravity of his planned announcement. Every detail of their preparation revealed the theatrical nature of their intended revelation. The Seattle afternoon faded into evening, city lights beginning to twinkle like stars fallen to earth. From my office window, I watched ferries cross Elliott Bay, their steady progress a reminder that even the most turbulent waters eventually calm. A text from Dan confirmed our dinner reservation, his message carefully casual, betraying nothing of his planned devastation. My team continued their precise choreography. Amy monitoring financial transactions, Susan tracking internal firm communications, Olivia's network observing every movement. Each piece of evidence added another nail to the coffin of Dan's deception, another thread in the net we'd woven to catch him. The white power suit hung ready in my office closet, its clean lines a stark contrast to the chaos of documents spread across my desk. In my safe, the prenup agreement waited like a loaded weapon, its innocent-looking pages concealing a trap Dan had never bothered to fully understand. Seattle's perpetual gray had lifted, leaving the city bathed in unusual clarity. From my vantage point, I could see Canlis perched on its hillside, waiting for tonight's performance. Dan thought he was directing a simple scene, a civilized dinner where he'd reveal his relationship with Jennifer, suggest an amicable divorce, present himself as the reasonable party. Barbara's final advice echoed in my mind as I reviewed our strategy one last time. "Remember," she'd said, "this isn't just about exposing their affair. This is about protecting everything you've built, everything they tried to steal using your own expertise against you." The evidence painted a picture of calculated betrayal. Every property purchase, every hidden account, every manipulated business connection revealed the extent of their planning. They'd used my professional reputation as a shield, my industry relationships as stepping stones, my business acumen as camouflage for their escape. Now those same elements would become their undoing. The prenup clause wasn't just about financial penalties. It was about justice served with the same methodical precision they'd used to betray me. Tonight, when Dan thought he was orchestrating his perfect exit, he would discover just how thoroughly he'd been outmaneuvered. The quiet hum of my downtown office provided the perfect backdrop for finalizing our counter-strategy. Amy Zhang meticulously organized financial records while Rick Coleman's voice came through the speakerphone, outlining the legal maneuvers we'd set in motion. Every element had to align perfectly for tonight's revelation at Canlis. My private investigator's latest update showed Dan leaving Foster and Hayes early, his overnight bag suggesting he wouldn't be returning to our Mercer Island home after dinner. A series of photos captured him entering the Four Seasons, where Jennifer had checked in hours earlier. They weren't even trying to hide anymore, confident in their impending triumph. Olivia burst through my office door, waving her phone. "You need to see this," she said, pulling up a real estate listing. The Vancouver waterfront condo had just been staged, its modern furnishings and sweeping views a testament to Jennifer's taste. The property description read like a love letter to luxury living, each amenity carefully selected for their imagined future. A message from Susan flashed across my screen, marking another piece falling into place. Executive committee meeting just ended. Managing partners are implementing emergency succession protocols. They know something's coming. Foster and Hayes was battening down the hatches, preparing to distance themselves from the impending scandal. Barbara's steadying presence filled the room as she arrived for our final strategy session. Her sharp eyes took in the evidence spread across my conference table. Property deeds, bank statements, surveillance photos, each document telling its own story of calculated deception. "Everything's ready at the bank?" she asked, settling into her chair. "Accounts will freeze the moment we give the signal," Amy confirmed, tapping her tablet. "Every hidden asset, every shell company, every property transaction, we can lock it all down with one phone call." Months of forensic accounting had revealed the full scope of Dan's financial web, each thread now primed for severance. The afternoon light painted Seattle's skyline in shades of amber as we refined our timing. Rick's paralegal had confirmed the latest property transfer, a mountain lodge in Bend, Oregon, purchased through yet another shell company. The deed listed Jennifer's sister as the registered agent, another failed attempt at concealment. "Their arrogance is almost impressive," Barbara remarked, reviewing the transaction details. "Using your own industry contacts, your professional relationships, all while thinking you wouldn't notice." She shook her head, years of experience evident in her knowing smile. Men like Dan always forget that the skills that made their wives successful don't disappear just because they're being betrayed. Olivia's network provided constant updates on the evening's preparations. Dan had reserved the most prominent table at Canlis, ensuring their performance would have the perfect backdrop. Jennifer's afternoon included a final dress fitting at Nordstrom, her selection a designer piece in striking red, a bold choice for someone supposedly attending a casual business dinner. "The timing has to be precise," Rick emphasized through the speakerphone. "Let them make their announcement. Let them think they're in control. When they're at their most confident, that's when we reveal everything." His strategy mirrored the careful planning they'd used against me, turning their own methods into weapons. Susan's inside knowledge of Foster and Hayes proved invaluable as we mapped out potential reactions. "The firm will try to contain the damage," she predicted. "They'll distance themselves from both Dan and Jennifer, probably announce an internal investigation into client fund management. The ripples would extend far beyond our marriage, touching every professional relationship they'd exploited." Amy's financial monitoring revealed more patterns of deception. Credit card statements showed matching purchases at high-end retailers, his and hers watches, coordinated luggage sets, items clearly intended for a shared future. Each transaction added another layer to our documentation, another nail in the coffin of their careful planning. The sunlight faded from my office windows as evening approached, city lights beginning to twinkle against the darkening sky. My white power suit weighted like armor, each precisely tailored line a reminder of the strength I'd built long before Dan entered my life. The leather portfolio containing our evidence sat ready, its contents about to shatter their illusion of control. A text from Dan arrived, confirming he'd meet me at Canlis. No mention of Jennifer, no hint of their planned revelation. His message carried the same casual tone he'd perfected over months of deception, each word now reading like a masterclass in manipulation. Barbara stood beside me at the window, her reflection overlaying the city view. "You've built something remarkable," she said quietly. "Not just your business empire, but this response to their betrayal. You've turned their own strategy against them with a precision they never anticipated." The final pieces of our plan locked into place as the team dispersed to their positions. Amy would monitor financial transactions in real time, ready to trigger the account freezes. Susan's contacts within Foster and Hayes would track the firm's immediate response. Olivia's network would ensure we knew every movement within Canlis. Rick's last advice echoed in my mind as I gathered my things. "Remember, this isn't just about exposing their affair. This is about protecting everything you've built, everything they tried to exploit. Let them show their hand first, then reveal just how thoroughly they've been outplayed." The drive to Canlis took me past familiar landmarks, each one holding memories now tainted by knowledge of their deception. The Seattle skyline glittered with possibility, reminiscent of the view I'd fallen in love with when first moving to the city. Back then, I'd been determined to make my mark in the real estate world, never imagining my biggest challenge would come from such intimate betrayal. My phone buzzed with confirmation that Jennifer had arrived at the restaurant, slipping in through the side entrance as planned. Dan's message followed moments later. He was running slightly late, suggesting I go ahead and get our table. Their choreography was perfect, each movement designed to create the illusion of spontaneity. They thought they were orchestrating a civilized ending, a controlled demolition of our marriage. Instead, they'd walked into a trap of their own making, every deceptive choice now transformed into evidence against them. Tonight, when they thought they were writing the final chapter of our story, they would discover just how thoroughly they'd underestimated the woman they'd tried to deceive. The valet took my car as I stepped into the Seattle evening, the city spread out below like a carpet of stars. Inside my leather portfolio, years of marriage and months of investigation waited to be revealed. Dan and Jennifer had spent months planning this moment, confident in their ability to control the narrative. They had no idea they were about to become characters in a very different story, one where justice arrived served with the same calculated precision they'd used to betray me. The maitre d' at Canlis greeted me with practiced warmth, leading me to the prime table Dan had requested. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a sweeping view of Lake Union, Seattle's lights beginning to shimmer against the darkening sky. A bottle of Dom Perignon waited in an ice bucket, Dan's signature move for important occasions. My phone buzzed silently with updates from the team. Amy monitoring the final property transfer in Vancouver, Rick confirming the legal documents were in order, Olivia's network tracking Jennifer's arrival through the service entrance. Everything proceeding exactly as expected. A choreographed dance where only I knew all the steps. The sommelier approached, gesturing to the champagne. "Compliments of Mr. Mitchell, madam. Shall I pour?" I declined with a smile, knowing Dan would want to make a show of opening it himself. A small detail, but one that revealed so much about his need to control every aspect of this evening's performance. Through the restaurant's subtle reflections, I caught glimpses of Jennifer seated at the bar. Her red dress commanded attention, diamond bracelet catching the light with each practiced movement. She sipped white wine, checking her phone regularly, waiting for Dan's signal to join us. The perfect mistress playing her role in their carefully scripted scene. Susan's text confirmed Dan had left Foster and Hayes, his corner office already being quietly packed up by trusted staff. The managing partners weren't taking any chances, preparing to distance themselves from the impending scandal. Their damage control as methodical as Dan's betrayal. The dining room hummed with quiet conversation, Seattle's elite enjoying another evening of fine dining and spectacular views. Many faces I recognized: tech executives, real estate developers, legal powerhouses, all potential witnesses to tonight's performance, though none knew the true drama about to unfold. My leather portfolio sat beside me, containing every document, needed to shatter their illusion of control. Property records, bank statements, surveillance photos, each piece of evidence carefully curated to reveal the extent of their deception. The prenup clause waited like a loaded gun, its implications about to explode their carefully constructed plans. Dan arrived precisely on schedule, his tailored suit and confident stride projecting the image he'd perfected over years of courtroom victories. He kissed my cheek, the gesture as hollow as his smile, before taking his seat with the perfect view of both the city and the bar where Jennifer waited. "Stunning evening," he remarked, nodding to the sommelier to open the champagne. "Almost as beautiful as the night I proposed." The calculated reminder of our history made his planned betrayal even more pointed. He'd chosen this restaurant, this view, this moment with surgical precision. The champagne cork popped, the sound sharp against the muted restaurant ambiance. Dan raised his glass in a toast, his expression carefully neutral. "To 10 years, he said, the words carrying weight he thought only he understood. I sipped slowly, watching him check his phone with practiced casualness. Right on cue, Jennifer appeared to, coincidentally, notice us. Her surprise perfectly feigned, her approach to our table a masterclass in calculated spontaneity. "Oh, what a lovely surprise," she exclaimed, her designer dress rustling softly. "I'm here meeting clients, but they seem to be running late." Dan played his part flawlessly, rising to greet her with professional courtesy. "Jennifer, what a coincidence! Please, join us while you wait." His hand brushed her lower back as he pulled out a chair, the gesture intimate yet subtle enough to seem innocent to casual observers. The trio of crystal glasses caught the candlelight, As Dan poured champagne for Jennifer, his movements deliberate and smooth. They exchanged glances filled with secret meaning, confident in their ability to control this moment. The city lights sparkled beyond the windows, unaware of the drama unfolding against their backdrop. Amy's update flashed across my phone screen. The Vancouver property transfer complete, funds moved through their network of shell companies. Jennifer's sister had signed the final documents just hours ago, another failed attempt at concealment. Everything proceeding exactly as they'd planned, yet entirely differently than they imagined. The conversation flowed with practiced ease, discussing office politics and upcoming cases. Each exchange carefully crafted to establish the groundwork for their revelation. Jennifer commented on my dress with perfectly pitched admiration, the compliment as false as her professional demeanor. Dan ordered another bottle of champagne, setting the stage for his performance. His confidence grew with each passing moment, every gesture and word orchestrated to create the perfect prelude to his announcement. The weight of the prenup clause in my portfolio grew heavier, waiting for its moment. The sommelier returned with fresh glasses, his discretion impeccable as he navigated the growing tension at our table. Through the window's reflection, I caught Olivia's confirmation, her contacts positioned throughout the restaurant, ready to witness every moment of what was about to unfold. Seattle's lights danced across the lake as Dan cleared his throat, reaching for Jennifer's hand with practiced timing. The moment they'd planned for months was approaching, each movement choreographed to present their relationship as something new and unexpected, rather than the calculated betrayal it was. Rick's final message confirmed everything was in place. One word from me would freeze every account, lock down every property, shatter every escape route they'd so carefully constructed. The trap was set, baited with their own arrogance and sealed with their deception. The dining room's soft murmur provided the perfect backdrop for their planned revelation. Other diners caught in the periphery of their performance, unwitting extras in the scene they thought they were directing. Dan's fingers intertwined with Jennifer's, their confidence absolute in their ability to control the narrative. My phone silently collected updates from the team. Amy tracking real-time financial movements, Susan monitoring Foster and Hayes' emergency protocols, Olivia's network documenting every interaction, each piece of their plan about to become evidence of their undoing. The city spread out below us, like a chessboard, positions set for the final move. They thought they were the players, controlling every piece with masterful precision. They had no idea they were actually the pieces, moved into position by forces they never saw coming. Dan raised his glass one final time, his expression shifting to what he believed was sincere regret. The moment they'd orchestrated was about to begin, their perfect plan about to unfold exactly as they'd designed, but with an ending they never anticipated. Tonight's performance would indeed be unforgettable, just not in the way they planned. Dan cleared his throat, setting down his champagne glass with deliberate care. The candlelight caught the gleam in his eyes as he reached for Jennifer's hand, their fingers intertwining with practiced intimacy. "Rebecca," he began, his lawyer's voice perfectly modulated for maximum impact, "there's something we need to discuss." Through the restaurant's elegant atmosphere, I watched their performance unfold. Jennifer's expression shifted to calculated concern, her red dress catching the light as she leaned forward slightly. The diamond bracelet, his recent gift, sparkled at her wrist, a beacon of their betrayal. "Life takes unexpected turns," Dan continued, his tone suggesting he was delivering a carefully rehearsed opening statement. "Sometimes we find ourselves on paths we never anticipated." His thumb stroked Jennifer's hand, the gesture meant to appear unconscious rather than choreographed. My phone silently collected updates from the team. Amy Zhang confirming all financial tracking was in place, Rick Coleman standing by with legal documents, Olivia's network documenting every moment. The trap was set, though they had no idea they were the ones caught in it. Jennifer and I, Dan paused for effect, mastering the dramatic timing he'd perfected in courtrooms. Have discovered something unexpected, a connection that transcends professional boundaries. He looked at her with practiced tenderness, both of them playing their roles to perfection. I took a slow sip of water, letting the moment stretch. Through the window's reflection, I caught glimpses of other diners, Seattle's elite providing the perfect audience for their staged revelation. The city lights twinkled beyond, unknowing witnesses to this carefully orchestrated performance. We never meant for this to happen, Jennifer added, her voice soft with fake remorse. It just evolved naturally. Her free hand touched the diamond bracelet unconsciously, the same bracelet purchased weeks ago through one of their hidden accounts. Dan squeezed her hand in seemingly spontaneous support. I know this is difficult, he said, turning back to me. But I believe we can handle this transition with maturity and dignity. His confidence was absolute, certain in his ability to control every aspect of our dissolution. The leather portfolio sat beside me, heavy with evidence of their meticulous planning. Every property purchase, every hidden account, every secret meeting documented with precision that would have impressed even Dan's detail-oriented mind. You deserve honesty, Dan continued, reaching into his jacket pocket. I've prepared everything to make this as painless as possible. The divorce papers emerged, pristinely folded, another prop in their performance. We can handle this privately, maintain our professional reputations. Jennifer's expression remained carefully sympathetic, though her eyes betrayed a flash of triumph as Dan placed the papers on the table. They thought they were orchestrating a perfect exit, their future secured through months of hidden preparations. The Vancouver property has already closed, Dan added, his tone suggesting generosity. You can keep the house on Mercer Island. Jennifer and I will make a fresh start. His casual mention of their property plans was meant to seem spontaneous rather than calculated. I opened my portfolio slowly, extracting a single document with deliberate care. The prenuptial agreement, I said softly, sliding it across the white tablecloth. Perhaps we should review Section 7.3 before discussing property arrangements. Dan's confidence wavered slightly as he glanced at the document. The prenup is standard, he began, but I cut him off by turning to the specific clause. Barbara had insisted upon including 10 years ago. In the event of dissolution due to infidelity, I read aloud, my voice carrying just enough to make Jennifer shift uncomfortably. Any assets concealed through business entities or shell corporations become sole property of the injured party. The color drained from Dan's face as I continued reading. Each word of the clause fell like a gavel stroke, dismantling their carefully constructed plans. This includes properties purchased through deceptive means, accounts hidden through corporate veils, and assets acquired using professional connections. Jennifer's hand withdrew from Dan's as I laid out the evidence. Property deeds for the Vancouver condo, the Walla Walla Vineyard, the Montana Lodge, each purchase traced through their labyrinth of shell companies. Bank statements revealing transfers carefully structured to avoid detection until now. Fascinating timing, I noted, indicating the property documents. Each acquisition corresponds perfectly with Jennifer's business trips. The shell companies registered to her sister's address, funded through accounts you thought were untraceable. Dan's legal mind raced visibly, searching for loopholes, but Barbara had crafted the clause perfectly. Every attempt at concealment, every deceptive transaction had only strengthened its enforceability. His own expertise in contract law would tell him there was no escape. Evergreen Vista Holdings, I continued, naming their primary shell company. Interesting choice for property investments, though perhaps not as interesting as the offshore accounts or the creative use of client trust funds. Each revelation struck with precision, dismantling their facade piece by piece. The restaurant's quiet murmur continued around us, other diners unaware of the devastation occurring at our table. Jennifer's perfectly polished exterior cracked slightly as I revealed printed copies of their emails, travel receipts, jewelry store purchases, each piece of evidence methodically gathered and preserved. The managing partners at Foster and Hayes will be particularly interested in how client relationships were leveraged for personal gain, I added, watching Dan's professional confidence crumble, though perhaps not as interested as the bar association. The city lights sparkled beyond the windows, indifferent to the drama unfolding before them. Dan's hands shook slightly as he reached for his water glass, his courtroom composure deserting him as the magnitude of their miscalculation became clear. "Everything you tried to hide," I said softly, closing the portfolio with a gentle finality. "Every account, every property, every asset you attempted to conceal, it all transfers to me." The prenup clause is quite specific about penalties for deceptive financial behavior during marriage. Jennifer pushed back her chair abruptly, her designer dress rustling as she stood. The diamond bracelet caught the light one final time as she turned to leave, abandoning Dan to face the consequences of their shared choices. Her hasty exit drew subtle attention from nearby diners, the first crack in their perfectly planned performance. Dan stared at the prenup clause, his legal training allowing him to understand exactly how thoroughly they'd been outmaneuvered. Every strategic decision, every careful concealment had only served to strengthen the case against them. They thought they were writing the ending to our marriage. Instead, they'd written the evidence of their own undoing. A flurry of activity erupted across Seattle's legal community the morning after the Canlis confrontation. Foster and Hayes' managing partners called an emergency meeting before dawn, their prestigious firm's reputation suddenly teetering on the edge of scandal. The conference room buzzed with tension as they reviewed the evidence I'd methodically gathered over months. Susan Carter's phone lit up with constant updates from her contacts within the firm. Partners were scrambling to distance themselves from Dan's actions, conducting internal audits of every case he'd handled. The revelation that he'd used client relationships for personal gain sent shockwaves through the entire organization. My office downtown became a command center as the aftermath unfolded. Amy Zhang worked tirelessly, tracking the cascade of financial consequences triggered by our revelation. Bank accounts frozen, property transfers halted, shell companies exposed to scrutiny. Each move we made sent ripples through the elaborate web of deception Dan and Jennifer had woven. Rick Coleman arrived with a team of paralegals, armed with court orders and enforcement documents. The prenup clause had transformed from legal protection into a precision weapon, its implications reaching far beyond our marriage. "The Bar Association wants to launch an immediate investigation," he announced, spreading papers across my conference table. Jennifer's hasty exit from Canlis had only been the beginning of her retreat. By morning, she'd withdrawn her resignation from Foster and Hayes, instead facing immediate termination as the firm struggled to contain the damage. Her carefully curated professional image crumbled as quickly as her dreams of the Vancouver waterfront lifestyle. Olivia brought coffee and solidarity, her network of contacts providing real-time updates on the fallout. "They're saying Dan was escorted from the building this morning," she reported. "Corner office already being cleared out." The mighty attorney's spectacular fall playing out in front of the colleagues he'd thought would witness his triumph. Barbara Wilson arrived mid-morning, her expression satisfied as she reviewed the unfolding events. "The clause worked exactly as designed," she noted, accepting a coffee from Olivia. "Men like Dan always think they're too clever to get caught. They forget that the same skills that attracted them to their wives become their undoing." The Mercer. Island House stood empty, Dan having retreated to a downtown hotel rather than face the consequences of his actions directly. Moving trucks arrived under Amy's supervision, securing valuable assets before anything could mysteriously disappear. Each piece of art, each antique, each item purchased during our marriage carefully inventoried and documented. My phone buzzed, constantly with messages from Seattle's elite social circle. The same people who'd been dining at Canlis, witnessing the dramatic dissolution of Dan's careful facade, now reached out with mixed motivations of support and curiosity. Every call, every text carried undertones of scandal and speculation. The real estate community reacted with swift precision. Deals involving Dan's shell companies frozen, property transfers suspended, escrow accounts placed under microscopic scrutiny. The very industry connections he'd tried to exploit now worked against him, professionals closing ranks to protect their reputations. Susan forwarded an internal memo from Foster & Hayes outlining the firm's crisis response. Client notifications, file reviews, PR strategy, all designed to contain the damage Dan's actions had caused. His prestigious corner office already reassigned, his name removed from the website, his cases redistributed among remaining partners. Jennifer's sister called in tears, begging for leniency regarding her role in the property transfers. The Vancouver condo's ownership documents revealed her complicity in their deception, her signature on legal papers, now evidence of conspiracy rather than sisterly support. Each person they'd drawn into their scheme faced their own consequences. Amy's financial tracking revealed the extent of their miscalculation. Every attempt at concealment only strengthened our case, she explained, highlighting transaction records. Each shell company, each hidden account created a clear pattern of deceptive intent. The very sophistication of their planning had become evidence against them. Rick coordinated with the Bar Association's investigators, providing documented proof of how Dan had leveraged client relationships for personal gain. The ethical violations alone would end his career, he noted grimly. The financial misconduct just adds another layer of consequences. Olivia's cafe became a sanctuary as the media storm grew. Reporters gathered outside my office, hoping to catch glimpses of the unfolding scandal. Seattle's business community buzzed with speculation about how such a prominent attorney could fall so spectacularly from grace. Barbara supervised the legal team as they processed mountains of documentation. Property records, bank statements, corporate filings, each piece adding to the overwhelming evidence of systematic deception. The prenup clause she'd crafted had become a blueprint for justice, its implications reaching far beyond our marriage. The Four Seasons promptly cleared out Jennifer's belongings after her credit cards were frozen, her dreams of luxury living evaporating as quickly as her professional reputation. The diamond bracelet that had sparkled so confidently at Canlis now sat in an evidence folder, proof of financial misconduct rather than romantic gesture. Foster & Hayes' damage control extended to their client base, reaching out to anyone whose relationships Dan might have compromised. Each call, each letter carried carefully worded apologies and assurances of internal review. The prestigious firm's reputation hung by a thread, their handling of the scandal crucial to survival. My development projects continued without interruption, the real estate empire I'd built standing strong despite Dan's attempts to exploit it. If anything, my professional reputation grew stronger as colleagues recognized how thoroughly I'd protected my interests while exposing the deception. Seattle's legal community hummed with discussions of the prenup clause's implications. Barbara received calls from other attorneys, requesting copies of the language she'd crafted. Her foresight in protecting against sophisticated financial deception became a template for future agreements. By sunset, the magnitude of Dan's fall from grace became clear. His career in ruins, his reputation shattered, his carefully constructed escape route dismantled piece by piece. The man who'd thought himself too clever to be caught now faced the consequences of every deceptive choice. The city lights began to twinkle as I stood in my office, watching Seattle transform from day to night. Each glowing window represented a conversation about the scandal, a discussion of how the mighty had fallen, a reminder that sometimes justice arrives dressed in business attire with a perfectly crafted prenup clause in hand. 6 months transformed me from a betrayed wife into something entirely unexpected, a beacon of empowerment for women facing similar situations. My downtown office, once focused solely on real estate development, now housed the Mitchell Foundation for financial literacy and women's empowerment, where we turned painful experiences into powerful lessons. The Foundation's first workshop filled beyond capacity, drawing women from across the Pacific Northwest. They came seeking knowledge, carrying stories of hidden assets, concealed properties, and sophisticated financial deceptions. Each case echoed elements of my own experience, yet brought its own unique complexities to our growing understanding of how betrayal often wore a suit and carried a briefcase. Barbara Wilson took particular pride in our legal education series, teaching women to recognize and protect themselves against financial manipulation. Her prenup clause, now famous in Seattle's legal circles, became a case study in proactive asset protection. Understanding your worth isn't just about emotions, she would tell our participants. It's about recognizing and protecting your financial value. Amy Zhang developed a forensic accounting program, teaching women to spot the red flags she'd uncovered in my case: bank statements, property records, corporate filings. Each document became a potential key to unlocking hidden truths. Her expertise transformed complex financial concepts into accessible tools for protection and empowerment. Olivia expanded her role beyond emotional support, using her business acumen to help women build financial independence. Her cafe network, once crucial to uncovering Dan's deception, evolved into a support system for women navigating similar challenges. "Success is the best revenge," became her mantra, watching participants grow from victims to victors. The Foundation's impact rippled through Seattle's professional community. Law firms revised their partnership agreements, accounting practices, strengthened their oversight procedures, and real estate agencies implemented stricter disclosure requirements. Each change sparked by the recognition that sophisticated betrayal required equally sophisticated prevention. Susan Carter's experience as Dan's former assistant proved invaluable in developing corporate accountability programs. She understood how office dynamics could mask misconduct, how professional relationships could become covers for deception. Her insights helped create workplace guidelines that protected both employees and organizations. Rick Coleman's legal team provided pro bono support, ensuring women had access to quality legal representation regardless of their financial situation. The prenup clause that had protected my assets became a template for others, its language adapted to address various forms of financial concealment. My own transformation surprised me most. Speaking engagements filled my calendar, sharing platforms with business leaders and women's advocates. Each presentation helped another woman recognize her power, understand her rights, protect her interests. The pain of betrayal evolved into purpose, each lesson learned becoming a stepping stone for others. The Mercer Island house sold quickly, its proceeds funding scholarships for women seeking financial education. I moved to a downtown penthouse, its views of Puget Sound reminding me daily of how perspective could change everything. The same city that had witnessed my husband's betrayal now watched my evolution into someone stronger. Jennifer's attempted comeback in Vancouver's legal community faltered as news of her role in the scandal spread across the border. Her sister's involvement in property transfers led to professional consequences of her own, their carefully constructed escape route, becoming a cautionary tale in our workshop discussions. Foster and Hayes underwent its own transformation, implementing stringent ethical guidelines and partnership oversight. The firm's managing partners, eager to distance themselves from scandal, became unexpected allies in promoting corporate accountability. Their experience served as a case study in how organizations could protect themselves against internal misconduct. Dan's legal career ended not with the bang he'd planned, but with a whimper of disciplinary proceedings and license suspension. The sophisticated attorney who'd thought himself untouchable faced the consequences of every calculated decision, every hidden transaction, every manipulated relationship. The Foundation's reach extended beyond Seattle, drawing inquiries from women's organizations across the country. Our curriculum, born from personal experience and professional expertise, offered practical tools for identifying and addressing financial deception. Each success story added another layer to our understanding of how empowerment could rise from betrayal. Barbara's mentorship evolved into a formal program, pairing experienced professionals with women navigating complex transitions. Her insight that knowledge provided the best protection against exploitation became a cornerstone of our educational approach. The women she guided learned not just to survive betrayal, but to emerge stronger. Amy's financial literacy programs expanded to include digital tracking tools, helping women monitor and protect their assets in an increasingly complex financial landscape. Her methodical approach to uncovering hidden transactions became a blueprint for others seeking truth behind sophisticated deceptions. Olivia's network of professional women grew stronger, creating opportunities and connections that extended far beyond their original purpose. Her cafe hosted regular gatherings where stories of transformation inspired others to recognize and act on warning signs in their own relationships. The Mitchell Foundation's first anniversary approached with a waiting list for workshops and a growing library of resources. Each woman who walked through our doors carried her own story of discovery. Each success added another chapter to our collective understanding of resilience. Seattle's business community recognized the Foundation's impact with increasing support. Corporate sponsorships funded expanded programs, professional partnerships provided expertise and resources, and success stories inspired others to examine their own relationships with clear eyes. My real estate development company continued to thrive, each project a reminder that professional success could coexist with personal growth. The same skills that had helped me uncover Dan's deception now served to build something meaningful from its ashes. The city changed through my new perspective, each familiar landmark holding different meaning. The Canley's dining room, where everything unraveled, became a symbol of transformation, its spectacular views now representing possibility rather than pain. Seattle's sophisticated betrayal had created an unexpected opportunity for widespread empowerment. Evening light painted the Foundation's offices in shades of possibility as another successful workshop concluded. Women left carrying more than just knowledge. They took with them the understanding that sophisticated deception could be met with equally sophisticated defense, that betrayal's aftermath could become a blueprint for helping others. Looking out over the city that had witnessed both my devastation and rebirth, I realized that Dan's betrayal had given me something unexpected, a purpose larger than myself, a way to transform personal pain into public empowerment. The sophisticated trap he'd set had become a teaching tool, helping others recognize and escape similar situations. 2 years transformed my life in ways I never imagined. The Mitchell Foundation for Financial Literacy and Women's Empowerment had grown from a response to betrayal into a nationally recognized organization. Our downtown Seattle headquarters, occupying an entire floor of a gleaming high-rise, hummed with purpose and possibility. Today's workshop carried special significance. Our 1,000th graduate would receive her certification in financial self-protection. The room filled with women from all walks of life, each carrying stories that echoed elements of my own journey. Barbara Wilson stood at the podium, her elegant presence commanding attention as she shared the evolution of the prenup clause that had changed everything. Our legal education program had expanded beyond Seattle, reaching women across the country through virtual platforms and local partnerships. Rick Coleman's team now trained other attorneys in recognizing and preventing sophisticated financial deception. The ripple effects of one carefully crafted clause had created waves of change throughout the legal profession. Amy Zhang's forensic accounting workshops became mandatory training for financial institutions across the Pacific Northwest. Her methodical approach to uncovering hidden transactions helped countless women recognize and document deceptive patterns in their own relationships. Each discovery strengthened our understanding of how betrayal often hid behind complex financial structures. Olivia's support network evolved into a nationwide movement. Her cafe's success allowing her to create safe spaces for women in cities across America. The combination of professional networking and personal support provided a model for how communities could help women navigate challenging transitions. The foundation's impact reached beyond individual cases. Corporate policies changed, professional organizations implemented stricter oversight, and financial institutions developed new protocols for identifying suspicious patterns. Each improvement sparked by the recognition that sophisticated betrayal required equally sophisticated prevention. Susan Carter's insights into office dynamics led to groundbreaking research on workplace relationships and professional boundaries. Her experience as Dan's former assistant provided valuable perspective on how power dynamics could mask misconduct. The resulting guidelines helped organizations protect themselves and their employees. My own journey continued to evolve. Speaking engagements took me across the country, sharing platforms with business leaders and women's advocates. Each presentation helped another woman recognize her strength, understand her rights, protect her interests. The pain of betrayal had transformed into purpose, each lesson learned becoming a stepping stone for others. The real estate empire I'd built thrived under new direction, each project now including spaces dedicated to women's professional development. The same business acumen that had helped me uncover Dan's deception now served to create opportunities for others facing similar challenges. Jennifer's attempt to rebuild her legal career in Toronto faltered as our foundation's influence spread internationally. Her role in the scandal became a case study in professional ethics programs, her carefully planned escape route serving as a warning to others about the consequences of sophisticated deception. Foster and Hayes emerged from the scandal with revolutionary partnership agreements and oversight procedures. The firm's experience sparked industry-wide changes in how legal practices monitored and prevented financial misconduct. Their story became a powerful example of how organizations could transform crisis into positive change. Dan's fall from grace concluded with permanent disbarment, his sophisticated attempts at financial concealment becoming cautionary tales in law school ethics classes. The prestigious attorney who thought himself untouchable now served as a warning about the consequences of betrayal masked as business strategy. Barbara's mentorship program expanded nationally, creating a network of experienced professionals, guiding women through complex transitions. Her insight that knowledge provided the best protection against exploitation became the foundation's guiding principle. Each success story added another layer to our understanding of empowerment. The Mercer Island House, long sold, funded scholarships enabling women to access financial education regardless of their circumstances. My downtown penthouse became a gathering place for foundation leaders and supporters, its views of Puget Sound, reminding us daily how perspective could transform everything. Today's graduation ceremony represented more than individual achievements. Each woman walking across the stage carried knowledge that would protect not just herself, but others in her circle. The sophisticated deception that had threatened to destroy me had instead created a legacy of empowerment. Seattle's business community celebrated the foundation's success with increased support and partnership opportunities. Corporate sponsorships funded expanded programs, professional collaborations provided expertise and resources, and success stories inspired others to examine their own relationships with clear eyes. Looking out over the city that had witnessed both my devastation and rebirth, I realized that sophisticated betrayal had given me something unexpected, a purpose larger than myself, a way to transform personal pain into public empowerment. The trap Dan had set became a teaching tool, helping others recognize and escape similar situations. The sun set over Puget Sound as another successful workshop concluded, painting the city in shades of possibility. Women left carrying more than just certificates. They took with them the understanding that sophisticated deception could be met with equally sophisticated defense, that betrayal's aftermath could become a blueprint for helping others. My phone buzzed with a message from Barbara. Just received another law firm's request for our training program. Your story continues to create change. Each request, each success, each transformation added another chapter to a story that began with betrayal, but evolved into something far more powerful. The Mitchell Foundation stood as proof that sometimes life's greatest challenges create unexpected opportunities for growth and impact. From the ashes of a carefully planned deception rose an organization that helped women recognize their strength, protect their interests, and transform their lives. As I gathered my things to leave, a new participant approached, clutching a folder of suspicious financial documents. In her eyes, I saw the same mix of uncertainty and determination I'd felt years ago. "I think my husband," she began. I smiled, understanding perfectly what she couldn't yet say. "Let's take a look together," I replied, leading her to my office. Sometimes the most sophisticated deceptions create the strongest survivors. Outside my window, Seattle's lights began to twinkle, each one representing another woman discovering her power to transform betrayal into triumph. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.